Just 15 miles west of Echuca, on the Victorian side of the border with New South Wales, is an area known as Wharparilla. Today about 500 people dwell in this rural locality on the banks of the Murray River. On the 29th of September 1913, 15-year-old John Adam Anderson, son of James Anderson, a farmer at Canyapella on the eastern side of Echuca, went rabbiting about noon. He called his 2 dogs to come to him, picked up his axe, which he intended to use chopping out burrows, and set off whistling and shouting as he left. He walked away from his uncle's house, which was surrounded by peppercorns and fruit trees in blossom, on his errand. The house was adjacent to the main road, near the local schoolhouse. John was described as a quiet and unassuming boy, although one having high spirits. He had no known enemies. When John didn't return home by tea, his uncle, also named John Anderson, with whom he had lived the past 2 years, was not too concerned. The lad had stayed out until nightfall on previous rabbiting expeditions. His wife was upset, but he brushed it aside. Also residing in the house with John and his wife were their 12-year-old son and John's 3 unmarried sisters. The elder John went to visit a neighbour's house where a party was being held to welcome back a recently married couple to the district, and stayed until about midnight. When he returned home, he expected his nephew to be there, but no sign of him had been seen. Now worried, he set out at once to search for the missing boy. Not knowing which way he had gone, he struck out in different directions, calling out. After some time, he heard a dog barking, and knowing that neither of the dogs John had taken with him had returned, he headed in that direction. After a brief time, he encountered one of the dogs, which was barking and whining in a strange manner. It was a lonely spot in Freeman's paddock, about 1.5 miles from the Anderson home. The Freeman farmhouse was about 1 mile away. Following as the dog led him near a clump of ring-barked timber, the man saw something dimly in the night ahead. Striking a match, he realised he had found his nephew. Laying on the ground was the boy's headless body, the grass nearby covered in blood. 6 rabbits John's dogs had caught during the afternoon were slung across his shoulder in a bag. His right arm was outstretched, while the left lay across the body. It was between 1 and 2 a.m. when he found the body. The teenager had been shot twice, just above his heart and in his side, from only 10 to 20 paces away, and then mutilated with his own axe, which was discarded on the ground nearby. It was feared he was still alive when he was beheaded. Dr. Moss, who conducted the autopsy on the body, said the cause of death were blows to the back of the head by the axe. Recovering from the shock, he ran home and got a sheet which he brought back and used to cover the body. Then he journeyed to Echuca to inform the police of the tragedy, arriving in the town in the early hours of the morning. The police returned and commenced a search for the boy's head. It was located about 60 or 70 yards away from the body, partially concealed under some dried-out tree branches. The horror of the situation was intensified when it was found. During the decapitation, the killer had struck at the head again and again, leaving 9 large gashes across the face, almost damaging it beyond recognition. The remains were gathered together and taken to the morgue at Echuca. The district was horrified and anxious as the perpetrator of the horror could not be immediately identified. Superintendent Dungy, who led the investigation, had 2 Aboriginal trackers brought in to search for footprints in the paddock, which had been guarded by police to keep it as unaltered as possible. The paddock was part of the property of a prosperous farmer named William Freeman. While investigating, police learned that Freeman's youngest son, David Clarence Freeman, who was 14, had gone out shooting and had been with John during the afternoon. Clarence, as he was known, had been born in Echuca the same as John, but he had been born in 1899, 1 year later than John. Police interviewed the other boy, which was a difficult and tedious process, as Clarence was deaf in one ear and could not speak except for the words no and yes. He did not know sign language either. He was also thought to be intellectually handicapped. The Freeman family believed that Clarence's problems had occurred because of an event which occurred at Christmas just before he was born, in 1899. Flower papers were being cut for festive decorations when a fire ignited and a young girl had been burned to death. Clarence's mother's shock at witnessing the tragedy while pregnant was blamed. He was physically alert and well built. He had a fair face and hazel eyes. Nevertheless, with the assistance of Herbert Freeman, a brother of Clarence, police learned that Clarence had gone looking for birds' nests. The boy showed the police a tree where the two lads had found a bird's nest that day. Then he gestured that he was looking for rabbits when he heard a shot. Turning around, he saw John fall and saw that a third boy had laid a gun on the limb of a dry tree from 30 yards away and fired. He then pantomimed the actions of the killer in running up to John and hacking at his head with the axe, then running off in the direction where the head was discovered. Police could not get Clarence to explain how the head was carried to the place where it was found. He pointed that he had gone around a field in crop to reach home, but the trackers showed he had gone through the crop to home. Police learned that Clarence had twice threatened to shoot John. He was apparently jealous of John's skill in catching rabbits using his dogs, and he also felt that John was a poacher for being on the Freeman's land. A breech-loading gun was located in Freeman's bedroom, which had been recently discharged. With no evidence of anyone other than the two boys having been present at the time of the murder, Clarence was taken into custody, charged with the crime. Police believe the attack took place before 4 p.m, although a man ploughing a field about half a mile away that day until 5:30 said he had heard no gunshots. Another farmer said he heard shots about 3. The police court at Echuca was crowded on the morning of the 2nd of October, with people hoping to catch a glimpse of the accused. They were, however, thwarted as the case was heard in camera in the Children's Court. Freeman was formally charged and proceedings adjourned until the 9th. He was returned to the police station. Another boy named Charles Anderson, who lived with the Freeman family and was not related to John Anderson, had volunteered to stay with Clarence and keep him company while he was held by police. Meanwhile, the trackers continued to examine the paddock to rule out the presence of a third person, and the detectives working on the case gathered fingerprint evidence. In the afternoon, the body of John Anderson was laid to rest. At the inquest on the 9th of October, John Edward Anderson revealed that he had once asked Clarence to leave his property, as the boy's behaviour displeased him. A number of children had come to the farm in March 1912 to get some grapes. Clarence was not satisfied with the amount he was given and went into the vineyard to get more. Clarence had responded 6 months later by gesturing that he would shoot the man. Edith Anderson, aged 11, who was John's cousin, said she had often gone with him rabbiting and that Clarence frequently joined them. There were sometimes disputes between the boys over ownership of the rabbits. She said her cousin Jack never carried a gun, but Clarence usually did. Jack was scared of Clarence, she said. Clarence's 10-year-old sister Lillian saw him leave the house with the gun in the morning and return home with it and a rabbit about 4 p.m. Another sister, Edith, who was 12, noticed blood on her brother's pants and stockings. She was with Clarence when an older brother, Ernie, said that John had been killed. Clarence signed, "Poor Jack, what killed him?" The government analyst later proved that the blood was not human and was likely from rabbits. There were a few very small spots of human blood on his coat and shirt. Raymond Francis, a 12-year-old who attended school with the boys, testified about a fight at school between the two. Some trees had been ring-barked, and when the teacher asked who had done it, John had said Clarence had chopped them with an axe. Later, John was sitting on a log outside and Clarence punched John on the nose. During the fight, which went on for some time, John bested his opponent, who responded by signing "shooting John" and uttering "bang," and indicating he would cut his throat. James Leon Henderson, 13, was the boy whom Clarence had accused of the murder. He gave evidence that he was driving sheep with his father at the time. Multiple witnesses vouched for the veracity of this statement. He also said that Clarence had taken a pea rifle to school once about 2 years before, and when he was reproved for writing on a door, had pointed it at the teacher. At the conclusion of the inquest, Clarence Freeman was committed for trial. Almost at once, his fitness to plead became a matter of debate. The trial began on the 21st of October, where the opinions of 3 doctors were given before a jury. It was decided by them that Clarence was not fit to plead, and he was ordered to be detained in Bendigo jail until the governor's pleasure was known. Soon after, he was taken to Melbourne jail, where he could receive medical attention and treatment befitting his case. It seems Clarence may have remained institutionalised for the rest of his life. He died at Ararat, where there was a notorious mental asylum, in 1961.